Every few hours, there's another headline, another breaking, another missile, another statement saying things are under control. But here's the problem. Nothing about this is under control anymore. Right now, Iran is still launching missiles into Israel. Air raid sirens are going off almost daily. Interceptors are firing. Some missiles are getting through. And both sides are not slowing down. They're escalating. And if you think this is just another short flare-up, you're missing what's actually happening. Because this is not just a conflict anymore. This is a system starting to slip. And once a system starts slipping in the Middle East, it doesn't stop where people expect. So let's anchor this clearly, fast. Iran has launched hundreds of missiles at Israel since this war began. Some of those strikes are now using more complex warheads. Even with strong air defenses, a small number are still hitting cities, injuring civilians, and creating damage. Israel, in response, is hitting deeper inside Iran, targeting missile sites, storage, and weapons production. And both sides are saying the same thing in different ways. This is not over. In fact, Israeli officials have already warned that attacks will escalate and expand. Now here's the real question. Why does this feel different? Why does this feel like something that might not stop? Because three things have changed. And once you see them, you'll understand why people are starting to say this escalation might be uncontrollable. First, this is no longer about one strike or one retaliation. This is now a cycle. And cycles are dangerous. In the beginning of most conflicts, there's a pattern. One side hits, the other responds. Then both sides pause, reassess, maybe de-escalate. That's how things stay contained. That's not happening here. Now it's different. Iran fires missiles, Israel strikes back, deeper, Iran adapts, Israel expands, targets repeat. No pause, no reset, no breathing room. And here's the problem with cycles like this. They don't need a big decision to escalate. They escalate automatically. Every new strike justifies the next one. Every retaliation becomes the reason for a stronger retaliation. And before anyone officially declares a wider war, you're already in one. That's the first shift. Now here's the second. The battlefield is expanding quietly. Most people are still watching this like it's just Iran versus Israel. It's not. Look closer. Strikes are hitting not just Israel, but also affecting Lebanon, Gulf regions, and energy routes. There are fears around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical oil choke points in the world. And when that gets involved, this stops being regional. This becomes global. We're already seeing the impact. Oil markets reacting, flights disrupted, countries adjusting energy policies, even protests happening in countries far from the battlefield because of rising costs. That's not normal for a contained conflict. That's what happens when a war starts leaking out of its borders. And here's the punchline for this part. When a war starts affecting people who are not even part of it, it gets harder to control. Because now more actors, more interests, more pressure gets pulled in. And that leads to the third and most dangerous shift. Adaptation. Iran is not fighting the way people expected. After early strikes damaged many of its launch systems, Iran didn't collapse. It adjusted. Now it's using fewer missiles, but more strategic ones, launching from deeper inside its territory, targeting softer, civilian, and economic zones, and using methods that are harder to fully neutralize. That matters more than people think, because this isn't about volume anymore. It's about pressure. You don't need to overwhelm defenses completely. You just need to make them leak. And once even a few missiles get through, the psychological impact multiplies. Because people don't remember how many were stopped. They remember the one that hit. That's how pressure builds. That's how fear spreads. That's how confidence starts cracking. Now let's pause for a second, because this is where people usually get it wrong. They think escalation means one massive moment, a big announcement, a dramatic turning point. That's not how modern conflicts work. Modern escalation is quiet, incremental, messy. One more strike, one more response, one more boundary crossed, until suddenly, you're somewhere you never planned to be. And that's exactly what this looks like right now. Now, to be fair, there is a counterpoint. Some analysts will say this is still controllable, that both sides understand the risks, that neither Iran nor Israel actually wants a full-scale regional war. And that may be true, but here's the problem with that argument. Control only works when both sides agree on limits. Right now, those limits are getting tested daily. And when limits keep getting tested, they eventually break. That's the risk. Now here's something else most people are not paying attention to. time. The longer this goes on, the worse it gets. Because long conflicts don't just drain resources, they change behavior. At the beginning, strikes are calculated. Later, they become emotional. At the beginning, targets are strategic. Later, they become broader. At the beginning, leaders manage escalation. Later, escalation manages them. That's the shift you have to watch. And we're starting to see early signs of it. More aggressive language. More willingness to hit deeper targets. Less concern about international pressure. And more normalization of constant strikes. That's not stabilization. That's drift. Now here's the bigger picture. The US is involved. Israel is escalating. Iran is adapting. And the region is reacting. That combination has historically never stayed contained for long. Because once multiple layers get involved, military, economic, political, the system becomes fragile. And fragile systems don't break all at once. They crack, then crack again. Then suddenly, something gives. So the real question is not, is this escalating? That answer is obvious. The real question is, how far does this go before someone miscalculates? Because that's how uncontrollable situations begin. Not from intention, from miscalculation. One strike that goes too far. One response that hits the wrong place. One moment where someone decides they can't back down anymore. That's all it takes. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We may already be closer to that moment than people think. Because when missile strikes become routine, when retaliation becomes automatic, when escalation becomes normalized, the system doesn't need a trigger anymore. It's already moving. And that's what makes this dangerous. This is no longer about one decision. It's about momentum. And momentum is hard to stop. Now I want to leave you with one simple question. Because this is the question that actually matters. Not who's winning. Not who's right. Not who started it. But this, at what point does escalation stop being a choice and start becoming the only direction left? Because if we're already past that point, then what you're watching right now is not just another conflict. It's the beginning of something much harder to contain. And most people won't realize it until it's already too late.